Hi everybody, welcome to the Nexus Report. I'm Bill Whittle, and we're just going to cut to the chase today because we got a lot of mail to move. A woman named James Koston wrote, me neither, wrote an op-ed piece in the New York Times called "The Hollow Bravery of Ben Shapiro." And here's one of the opening graphs. What Mr. Shapiro does on campus is shadow boxing meant to pander to his conservative fans whose values dominate mainstream American culture. Really? Let's watch TV any night and see whose views dominate mainstream American culture. Continuing with the article, she wrote, if he wanted to be genuinely brave, he challenged some of the wrong-headed ideas held by his right-wing fans. Instead, he uses his megaphone, the website The Daily Wire, to reinforce what they already believe. You know, I've perused some of Jane's articles, and I can't find one instance, not one, where she is challenging the wrong-headed ideas of her left-wing fans. Instead, she uses her megaphone, JaneKoston.com, to reinforce what they already believe. I find that cowardly. In other words, what she's basically saying is, Ben Shapiro's a coward because Ben Shapiro doesn't have the bravery to tell the people that listen to Ben Shapiro that everything that he and they believe, based on philosophers going back for centuries and time-tested ideas that are just here forever, he doesn't have the courage to tell them that they're wrong and that the world really does work the way that deep thinker and noted intellectual Jane Koston says that it does. That's an our charge to level against somebody. Jane, this is going to come as a big shock to you. I hope you're sitting down. But it's not our job to argue your side of the argument because it's inarguable. And that's why you wrote the article, because you have to accuse Ben of something. So the reason that this thing became a bit of a news story is because the Daily Wire, of which Ben Shapiro is the editor-in-chief, put out a video called Happy Indigenous People Day. They did it in response to Christopher Columbus statues being defaced and all the rest of this left-wing violence and terrorism and all the rest of this general misbehavior that accompanies the left wing wherever they go. Far left, anyway. So they wrote a video called Happy Indigenous People Day. Now, this video wasn't written by Ben, it didn't star Ben, wasn't narrated by Ben, and Ben didn't post it. Ben, as a matter of fact, was on vacation. Now, here's what's interesting about this. When Ben saw the video and heard about it, he said, I think we should take it down. People on the Daily Wire staff argued with him. They said, if you take it down, it's going to look like a retreat, Ben. It's the worst thing you could do. And Ben said, you know, I just think it crosses the line, and I think we should take it down. In other words, Ben Shapiro is being criticized for doing the one thing that he seems like he should have been doing in the first place. Admitting that he had a problem, he told Jane Koston that he thought it was going too far, so he took it down. And then when the person who did post it, and who did write it, and who did narrate it, said, well, Ben, you're taking so much flack for this. At least let me come up and say it was my article. I did it. You didn't know much about it, didn't know anything about it. You've been on vacation for a week. Ben said, no, if I do that, if I let you take if I let you become responsible for it, then that's cowardly. It's cowardly. So he wouldn't do it. He said, I'm the editor of the Daily Wire. It's my responsibility. I'll take the heat for it. Now, Jane, I've noticed, at least in a casual perusal of your articles, that I didn't see any outrage of the kind you directed at Ben for this video. Nothing on your progressive icon, Elizabeth Warren, who, let's not forget, didn't figuratively appropriate American indigenous people. Didn't just wear a hairstyle or dress in one of their outfits. She claimed to be one. She claimed to be one because it made her easier to get admission into, I think it was Harvard University, some cushy six-figure job. So Elizabeth Warren, famed liberal progressive icon, told the people at the university that she was in fact American Indian, and that's why she deserved to get in on this special set-aside program. Jane Koston had to write an op-ed piece called The Hollow Bravery of Ben Shapiro, because if Jane Koston had written a headline for what the article was actually about, it would have been, here's why Jane Koston disagrees with Ben Shapiro and many, many other people. And I got a funny feeling that wouldn't have made it to the New York Times op-ed piece. Strangely enough, I took a look at the article. I think there's 1,071 words in there. 23% of the total article has to do with Ben Shapiro directly, personally. Double that percentage, actually 47%, because I did the count. deals with things that have nothing to do with Ben Shapiro at all. What some editor wrote on the Federalist, and Jane's views on transgenderism, and Jane's views on this, and Jane's views on that. Half of the article doesn't mention anything about Ben Shapiro at all. But as I said, they're not going to read an article called "I'm Jane Koston, and here's where I disagree with Ben Shapiro and many, many other people that he has nothing to do with." Now, let's talk very briefly about the actual courage of Ben Shapiro. She says that Ben Shapiro's shtick, that's what she called it, his shtick. I'm surprised he didn't add an oy vey, what a shtick, is to pretend to be bravely battling violent forces of the left, when in point of fact, according to Jane, the left is compassionate and peaceful, and it's all a kind of a fiction invented by the right wing. You know, this idea that the left is violent and that it takes courage to go to campuses and face them. So here's just a few moments of video. Now, I know this is going to be a challenge for you viewers, but who are you going to really believe? Are you going to believe Jane Koston or your own lying eyes? You take a look at this video and you tell me if you think this is something you'd want to do 20 times a year, because that's what Ben Shapiro does. He goes out and faces this rage, this violence, arson, attempted murder. People have been hit over the head with bicycle locks. Ben gets out there and does it 20 times a year. Would you? Would you want your sons or daughters to go out and face this? Would you want them to be the center of this? When he was at Berkeley last time, they had $600,000 and hundreds of policemen for security just to protect Ben Shapiro from the, Kostonites, the liberals, the progressives, the kind, tolerant people who mock this guy's courage because he's not telling his own side why his own side is wrong. I see articles like this and I really just don't know what to say. Other than the fact that of all the people that I know in this line of work, the one person who does in fact criticize his own side most is Ben Shapiro. He doesn't just have the physical courage to go out there and face these mobs of raging Kostonites. He actually has the moral courage to challenge his own party when he thinks they're wrong. Ben Shapiro caught an enormous amount of grief for his criticisms of Donald Trump all the way through the campaign. I sat with Ben Shapiro right next to him on election night, and I heard nothing but Ben Shapiro talking about how Donald Trump is not a conservative. Of all the people in this business who have the courage to disagree with their own party and actively say so, I put Ben Shapiro at the top of the list. And for his disagreement over Donald Trump, he not only got all the love and all of the violence and all of the fires and all the rest of it, he was barricaded in a broom closet, by the way, at one of his events, with the people on Jane's side bashing at the door saying we need to kill the guy. So that seems a little bit more courageous to me than writing an article like this. But when he stands up for what he believes in against Donald Trump, then the alt-right jumps on his case, and he gets tweets like, you're going to die, you dirty Jew bastard, and his newborn baby is like, oh, look, a newborn cockroach. And then he gets tweets and threats basically saying the entire Shapiro family is going to go to the gas chambers, complete with pictures of Zyklon B canisters and all the rest of it. And if you did that, if that happened to you, if it happened to you once, would you ever go out and do that again? He gets hundreds of these a day, and he goes out 20 times to face this kind of violence, and you're calling him a coward? You're calling him a coward? It's hollow courage for Ben Shapiro? Just look at these murderous Antifa bastards who are using threat and intimidation like all of the left-wing people, like all of the collectives, all the socialists. They're using their street army to get people to shut up. The reason that Jane and the rest of the New York Times and everybody else on the left is attacking Ben Shapiro and calling him a racist and all the rest is because Ben Shapiro has the fundamental courage to stand up and say what's actually going on in the world. And the reason they attack Ben Shapiro is because Ben Shapiro and I and a bunch of other people who are conservatives point out that the murder rate in this country and the massacre of black people is not being committed by policemen, it's being committed by other black people. The horrific shooting that we saw in Las Vegas a couple of weeks ago killed 60 people. That's September. In Chicago alone, that's just Chicago. In Chicago, in September, 59 people murdered. Chicago's been run by Democrats for 80 consecutive years, something like that, and so is Newark, and so is St. Louis, and Ferguson, and Detroit, and all the rest of them. So people like Jane have to make these kind of comments about people like Ben, because if they don't, people are going to start looking at what's actually going on in the world. And that's a little uncomfortable for people like Jane Koston and the rest of the people at the New York Times. And I'll just close by saying this. You know, it is a cowardly thing to say about Ben Shapiro. I suspect you're right that he's a coward because you can't figure out where he's wrong. And it's certainly easy to take a cheap shot like that. When I say a cheap shot, by the way, I'm not talking about you, Jane. hardly anybody knows who you are, and even fewer people care. I'm talking about the New York Times. I'm talking that the New York Times had to go that far down the food chain to reach somebody who could write an article that libelous just for the shock of the headline. I find that to be, on the part of the New York Times, really stellar example of hollow courage. You miserable coward bastards.